the Hanachos review, first of a series of going through the Hanachos, reviewing the Hanachos, learning how to write Hanachos, understanding, as well as Baruch Hashem had the schus of having with us Rabbi Yosef Jacobson, going to share a few in Yonim in regards to Hanachos. We're holding now at the end of the Hatmimim, the Me'at Hashem of Chag HaShavuos. You know the famous Maisa of the Friedrich Rebbe. One time they came to the Friedrich Rebbe with the Yoni Askonus right after Shavuos, and the Friedrich Rebbe said, Ich bin noch nicht herab vom Berg. I'm still away from the mountain. I'm still not away from Shavuos. We have now finished our whole week of Yemei HaShavuos. The Rebbe explains in the Mems, the Rebbe explains that there are 7 days of Yemei HaShavuos. Seven days, we've got a whole week. We've got an entire week, a Sunday, a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday, a Friday, Shabbos of Yemei HaShavuos, where the Eibusher says, give you the Torah, I'm giving you a whole week of every single day with all the Shinuyim of the week. Show me how you makabel the Torah. Now we have finished the Yemei HaShavuos, we have concluded the Yemei HaShavuos, but not that we are rough from Barg and we leave the Barg, but we take Barg, we take with us the Rebbe, we take with us Moshe Rabbeinu, we take with us all the koyches that we are getting in this beautiful Pu'ula of Hanachos, writing down the Rebbe's Sichos, learning the Rebbe's Sichos, listening to the Sichos, and writing them down. As you know, the famous that the Alter Rebbe told the Tzemach Tzedek, that your coolness, your pen should be your chaver. That is a very, very strong way of applying, of connecting to the Torah we are learning. What is the better achana? And what is the better hashlama to Yemei HaShavuos, filling Shavuos, achana for Gimel Tammuz, than taking the Rebbe's Farbrengens and writing Hanachos, committing them down both to memory and then to paper, and really understanding the Rebbe's Farbrengens and making them down, writing them down clearly, which Be'ezus Hashem tonight we will hear some hadracha from one of the Chozer, one of the Manichim of the Rebbe's Sichos and Farbrengens. If I'm not mistaken, Rabbi Yosef Jacobson was one of the young Chozerim of the Rebbe's Farbrengens. So we'll have the schus of hearing some oisius, a little history, a little about the story, as well as the little tips and clarity on how the Hanachos work and how we could be understanding of how to do the Hanachos and the Chlal Iskasis, the Rebbe and the Rebbe's Torah. Without further ado, Yossi Jacobson.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Schusterman. Thank you very much, Rabbi Izakovich. And thank you very much, all of the Menahalim, Rosh Yeshivas, Mashgichim, Mashpiyim, who are involved in this incredible project and brought us all together here tonight. And of course, a special thank you to all of the Talmidim, to all of the Yeshiva Bochurim, all of the Bnei Torah, the Masmidim, and the Manichim and the writers. Thank you for joining us here on this Leil Shishi, Parshas Nosei Esrosh, the end of the Yemei Tashlumin of Shavuos. Just a little correction, not a correction, just a Hisofet Rabbi Schusterman. It wasn't they. The story, I think, the way I heard it was Reb Chatzah Feigen. Reb Chatzah Feigen was one of the secretaries of the Rebbe Rayatz, Hashem Yinkim Damer, Rabbi Cheskel Feigen, and I heard the story that it was about him. He went in, I think, with a letter or a few letters about certain situations, and the Rebbe Rayatz said, Ich bin noch nicht herab vom Berg. Just a little hisofa. It's always good to have a name for the story. Bruchim Haboyim, to all of the Talmidim. I see we're joined, Kanayin Hara. I just want to make sure you hear me. Could somebody nod that you hear me? Yeah? You can hear me clearly? Good. Okay, thank you. So first of all, thank you for the schus and the privilege of being with all of you Talmidim here. Masmidim, Shaikdim, Oivdim, Bnei Torah, Tayere Bochurim, Yeshiva Bochurim, Teirasam Nosam. Ashrei chelkechem v'gadol schuschem. How fortunate you are, how lucky you are, how blessed you are, that during this challenging tkufa and era, you don't cease from your avodas Hashem, tmidim kesidrum, musafim kol chasam, to steig mechayil el chayil, in your learning, in your hasmada and shkida and Torah. And I was asked this evening to speak to you a little bit about my experiences having the schus for a few years being involved in chazering the Rebbe's Farbrengens, and then being one of the manichim, meaning one of those who are Maniach. I don't know if you know where the word Maniach comes from, but you learn Mesivtas Shabbos, you know, there's an Akira and there's a Hanacha. What's the connection of a Hanacha to Hanacha? Where does the word Hanacha come from? I'm not sure I know the answer. I assume the answer is that the Chozer, the one who was listening to the Rebbe, had to be Maniach. He had to place the ideas into words and make them land and rest on paper. So there was like a Hanacha with ideas which are in your mind and are more lofty, become concretized, and they become munach. They become munach, kluta kamishahuncha. They become placed on a piece of paper with ink, dioy alaksav, as the Lashon is, or in our generation, tfus, isis atfus, first typewriters, and then, of course, afterwards in the early 1980s, when it became computers. So that's the word hanocha. It's, so to speak, the way the Chozer was maniach. So now it's placed on the ksav. Come in. You can come in. And I guess it also is miramis, it also indicates something else. And that is, it's the way he understood it and the way he placed it on paper. Because remember, every mind is different, and every mind could be koilet and can absorb things that it can relate to according to its, as the Lashon in Tanya, kefi yecholos hasagasei v'sheirish nafshe l'mayla v'hasagasei b'pardes haTorah. Every neshama, every mind, first of all, has its natural capabilities. Its sheirish haneshama, how much it learned, its kishreines, so many different variables which come into play. So therefore, it's a hanocha. It's the way the Maniach took the ideas that he heard from the Rebbe, and he was Maniach it in his signin, in his style, according to his understanding on the ksav, in writing. Of course, every Maniach, if it was a real Maniach, tried to the best of his ability to capture the amitis ha'inyan, the authenticity, both in terms of teichen and in words, oisius. But nonetheless, every person is a person. A person is limited. A person makes mistakes. Shgiyas miyavin. And I assume that's part of the expression Hanacha Maniach, which is not an expression from this generation. It already goes back, I believe, quite a few generations, because the concept of Hanacha already started by the Alter Rebbe. I don't know if you know this, but the Alter Rebbe paid, I believe I once read that the Alter Rebbe paid his brother, the Maharil, Rabbi Yehuda Leib, the famous Maharil, who was a gon in his own right, to make a Hanacha of every maimer that he heard from his brother. And it's incredible that Alter Rebbe did this, because of this, we have today Torah, and we have Lakutei Torah, and we have hundreds and hundreds and thousands of maimarim of the Alter Rebbe over the years, because the Alter Rebbe made sure he understood the power. People, when they hear things, you think it's going to last forever. But the Alter Rebbe understood that if it's not written, it's not going to last. And I believe he would pay a salary to his brother, the Maril, to make sure that he's meiniach all of the maimarim that he heard. There were other manichim, of course. There was the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son. There was Reb Moshe, the Alter Rebbe's youngest son. There was the Tzemach Tzedek, the Alter Rebbe's grandson. There was the famous Pinchas Reizes, the Alter Rebbe's chassid, Pinchas Reizes, whom I think the Mittler Rebbe called the field marshal of Chassidus Chabad. And we still hear the beeps. I still hear the beeps. So there were others. So you have the Maril, you have the Tzemach Tzedek, you have the Mittler Rebbe, you have Reb Moshe, and you have Reb Pinchas Reizes. That's 5. Sometimes you had 5 manichim of a maimer. And then in each generation, you had these manichim, and of course, in our generation, in the generation of the Rebbe, there were the Manichim throughout the years. First and foremost was Hagon HaChassid Rabbi Yoel Khan Shlita Soll Sein Gesund, who began right away, Tovshin Yud, and continued throughout all of the years, throughout Tovshin and Beis for the next 42 years, all the way to the last Farbrengen, which was Shabbos Parshas Vayakel, Chof Hei Adar Rishon, Tovshin Nun Beis. How did I get involved in this? So I guess I got involved because of my older brother. He probably spoke at one of the sessions, I'm sure, or will speak. Rabbi Simon Jacobson, my older brother, the Bochur in our family, who was one of the group of the Chozer and one of the Manichim, who started in the late 70s in the Tovshin Lamets. And I guess that's how I got drawn into the Avodas HaKodesh. Now, there's a little interesting tidbit. The way it actually started, it's a cute thing. The ends of the sichos were very hard to remember. Why? Because the Rebbe, the sichos themselves had a theme that the Rebbe would develop. A Rashi, a Rambam, a Zohar, a Siyum Masechta, a Sugya, a Parshas HaShavua, a Maimer, something about the Shabbos, about the Parsha. It had its structure, its theme, questions, the answers. Sometimes the Rebbe would speak a contemporary union, something about Eretz Yisrael, sometimes about the Avodah of Hafatzas Hayadus, thank you, spreading Yiddishkeit. Thank you very much. But at the end of the Sikha, especially in the later years, the Lameds and the Mems, the Rebbe would say a lot of brachas, usually about Mashiach, but it can go for a few minutes. And the Rebbe would go from bracha to bracha. The Rebbe would quote a pasuk from Yeshaya and a pasuk from Yirmiyah, a pasuk from Amos, a pasuk from Tzvanya, a Lashon HaGemara, Lashon HaZohar, Lashon HaMedrash. And the brachas were very hard to remember. That's why you'll see sometimes in Sichos, at the end of the Sikha, it'll say Chozer Hasiyum. The end is missing because the Sikha was so long and so deep. By the time the Rebbe came to the brachas, it was hard to remember. I was a very young boy. I used to stand, the Rebbe would sit, and in front of the Rebbe there was a shvil. There was a path which the Rebbe wanted. It should be open so people should be able to go out, because in the earlier years when people had to go out for their physical needs, they would have to go on the tables, and the Rebbe felt it was disrespectful to them, and the antithesis of kavod habriya. So the Rebbe wanted there should be a shvil. At the end, that shvil just filled up with milk boxes because the Bochurim didn't have where to be. So that became such a tight place, such a pushy place, but it was supposed to be. And for many years, it was a shvil. It was pretty open, especially the weekday Farbrengens, so people could walk in and out. I mean, not so many people used it, but people used it. So I stood at the end of the shvil. My brother stood there. I see the Birshal Raskin is here on the video. So he stood on my right when he came from Morocco, and he made a Hanacha. Gemacht an Akira from Morocco and a Hanacha in New York, and he became Munach. And some other younger light and Bochurim who stood there. And I happened to stand there, my brother, and he asked me, he said, could you remember, I was a little kid, I was very young, could you remember the ends of the sichos, the brachas, the ends? Could you remember? So fine, why not? So I concentrated, especially at the ends. And I would chazer them, and he said, and I guess they felt that I did a pretty good job. So when I got a little older, I was drawn in to the Avodas HaKodesh of Chazorah, and then helping with writing, transcribing the sichos of Shabbos and of Yom Tov and of the weekdays as well. Another interesting personal experience I'll share with you is I had the schus that every Motzei Shabbos, right after Havdalah, I used to go into the office of WLCC. You know where the office is? I'm sure you guys got a tour of it. If you go to 770 upstairs, you go down the hallway, the end of the hallway, the last door on the left was right near the office of Rabbi Chadakov, Zechrona Levracha, Chaim Mordechai Isaac Chadakov, the Rebbe's secretary. On the left side is the offices of WLCC, where all the hookups would take place and rebroadcast to the world over. So Motzei Shabbos, right after Ma'ariv and Havdalah, I would go in there, and I would sit down with headsets, with a mic, and my friend Rabbi Yosef Hackner, Johnny Hackner, would tell me to begin. And I had the privilege of chazening verbally the whole Farbrengen of Shabbos or of Yom Tov. I was very young when it started, and the way it started was as follows. It was Yud Shvat, Tovshin Nun. Yud Shvat was, I think, on a Shabbos. Shabbos Parshas Boy, Yud Shvat Tovshin Nun, 1990, Yud Shvat. Of course, this was the 40th anniversary of the Istalkus Hilul of the Rebbe Rayatz and of the Rebbe's Rabbeist for the Rebbe's Nesias. So a huge oilum came in. It was our boyim Shana. Lo nosen Hashem lechem leiv ladas say nayim liris as nayim l'shmoya ad hayoyim hazeh. Gemara says in Avodah Zorah ad our boyim shnin lo koi inish adaita de Rabbe Avodah Zorah daf heyam et beis. It was a big Osiris. Farbrengen was packed. It was Shabbos packed. Wasn't easy to hear. The Rebbe spoke low in those years, lower. I think it was the second sich of the Farbrengen. The Rebbe asked that since it's our Boyim Shon, it's 40 years since the Hilula of the Rebbe Rayatz, a new tkufa. So tkufa of Koyim Inish Adaita de Rabbe. And the Rebbe asked that every chassid should build a new moisid dedicated to Harvotzes HaTorah, Harvotzes HaMitzvahs, Harvotzes HaYadus, Harvotzes HaMayonis. Every chassid should build a moisid dedicated to Torah, Avodah, Gemilas Chsadim, in his or her city or community, but everyone without exception should build a moisid. This was one of the suggestions, instructions, requests of the Rebbe by that Farbrengen in honor of 40 years. Everybody should get involved and build a new moisid or become part of building a moisid, an institution for Torah, for Yiddishkeit, for spreading Yiddishkeit, for spreading goodness, v'chuli. I still remember it was Mitzvah Shabbos. I was a yeshiva Bochur. I was in Shia learning in Beis Medrash. I think it was Shia Beis of Ahol Torah. My Rosh Hashiva that year was Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Wahlberg Shlita, who was later in Manchester, and I think in Eretz Yisrael, later in Manchester, and then Eretz Yisrael, Kfar Chabad. And I was a pretty young boy at the time. How old was I? I was in the area of 16 or 17. The Rebbe finished Ma'ariv, Matzoi Shabbos, and I don't know, a half an hour later, maybe 20 minutes later, I'm in the hallway where the Rebbe would give dollars. It was pretty empty. And I meet one of the Gaboyim of 770, who happened to be a neighbor of mine, my parents' home on Montgomery Street. His name is Reb Menachem Gelitsky. Menachem Gelitsky was in charge of the Siyumei HaRambam. Every halacha they finished, the Rebbe, they would make a Siyum HaRambam. Reb Menachem Gelitsky was in charge of that, the head of Koil Teferes Kenim Levi Yitzchak. He sees me, and he says, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, you made a new moisid? I said, Menachem, what's that? I'm not a moisid builder. He said, Du bist doch gewesen beim Farbrengen heint. You at the Farbrengen today. The Rebbe asked that every person should build a new moisid. What's your moisid? I said, the Rebbe wasn't talking about yeshiva Bochur. Yeshiva Bochur, their job is Teirasam Nosam. Anu ein lanu ela Torah. Job of yeshiva Bochur is to sitzen and learn by Tag und by Nacht. Well, I don't know. The Rebbe wasn't with yeshiva. He was talking to people who are involved in askanas, or even in business. They should get involved in a moisid. What it was a 16 or 17-year-old Bochur and start building moises? What's next? Menachem said, Das is pshetlach. You at the Farbrengen. You're now going to say you're not shaykh to what the Rebbe said? I was buying a moisid in Torah. I said, what do you want me to do? Go build a yeshiva somewhere? Would you want I should quit learning and go build a yeshiva? He says, no. I want you to start giving chazara, Mitzvah Shabbos, every Mitzvah Shabbos, to everybody around the world who can tune in to, then it was telephone lines, tune into WRC telephone line. They can hear right after Shabbos a review of the entire Farbrengen of the Rebbe, whether it's Mitzvah Shabbos or it's Mitzvah Yom Tov. I said, Menachem, this is the job that Rabbi Yoel used to do for many years. I think Rabbi Yoel would do it Sunday afternoon. And I don't think it's appropriate that I, at such a young age, should do this, should be the official chazara giver of the Farbrengens to everybody around the world, whoever tunes in. He nudged me. He drove me crazy. He said, listen, all the excuses, if you're not going to do it, nobody's going to do it. It's not done. This is a moisid. It's going to be your it's going to be your moisid that I'm helping you to build it. And he was so insistent. He schlepped me to the door of Yonis and Hackner, Chaim Baruch Halberstam, who was the founder of WCN, of Yonis and Hackner, who was the operator. He knocked on the door. I remember Hackner opens the door, Chaim Baruch, or both of them, and he says, Anaya Moisid. We have a new Moisid. Yosef Yitzchak Jacobson is going to start giving Chazorah every Mitzvah Shabbos. Before I knew it, I was in a chair with big headphones on both of my ears, on top of my head, and Hackner, all the lights going on with a big announcement, and him going like this, 1, 2, 3, go, you're live, and Chazorah began. And so it continued. There were many communities where Anash in those communities would stay in shul after Ma'ariv. They wouldn't go home to be able to hear the whole Farbrengens. For example, in Montreal, in Miami, and then it would play throughout the week so people could hear it. The next day, Sunday, Monday, the Chazorah would play throughout the week. And this was obviously discontinued. This was Tavshin Nun, so it continued for Tavshin Nun Aleph, Tavshin Nun Beis, until the last Farbrengen, which was Vayakel, as I said, Vayakel Tavshin Nun Beis. This was another component, which was also a very great privilege, very great schus. And then right after that, Rabbi Yoel would usually give Chazorah downstairs in 770. I already had an earlier Chazorah, Shabbos afternoon, right after the Farbrengens, so I should be able to do the Chazorah right after Shabbos. And then would start the big avodah of transcribing it on paper, or typing it on computer, I should say, which was very, very challenging. It was very difficult. It was very powerful. It was a great privilege, but I say it was very, very difficult. At least I could speak for myself. It was difficult for many reasons. Most of them, I think, are obvious. And I should tell you, I don't know, it's Farbrengen personally, so I'll share this with you. For many, many years, I'm not going to say Ad Hayom Hazeh, but close to Ad Hayom Hazeh, when Mitzvah Shabbos came, I got anxious. The reason is because those years, Mitzvah Shabbos, it was such a stressful work. It was so stressful. And I knew the second Shabbos is over. That's it. Bo Shabbos, bo Menucha, and after Shabbos, there's no Menucha. Because Mitzvah Shabbos, I was usually up all night writing, and very often Sunday, and sometimes Sunday night, and sometimes even later. So it was a very, very avodah gdoila. Tremendous, tremendous privilege, tremendous, tremendous chus, obviously, extraordinarily rewarding and powerful, but very challenging. It took a lot of yegiyah, a lot of discipline, a lot of diligence, a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of koiches hanefesh, and the most important thing, a lot of concentration, a lot of bittul, and a lot of learning. I'm going to now address a few points about this work, and then relate it to your work now, to your avodah now. And also, a lot of boys sent in questions. I got around 20 questions from Bochurim. I'm going to address those questions, and some of the questions I'll address in my talk now, and we'll take questions afterwards as well. You can chat here on the Zoom. There's a chat. You can ask your questions, and bli neder, I'll try to answer whatever I can. First of all, I'm going to talk about memorizing. How did we memorize the sichos? How can you memorize? So the first thing I'll tell you is not easy. To memorize a sicha is not easy. Very, very difficult. It takes a lot of work. But how? How can one even do it? And the answer to that is, really, I'm not sure I know the answer. That's the honest answer. But for it, I'll say a few points. Obviously, some people have kishroinus, they have skills, resources that Hashem gave them and blessed them. It makes them maybe, every person has their unique kishroinus in the world. Like the Rebbe once said in a Farbrengens, no person is a mashpia or a mekabel. No balchai is a mashpia or a mekabel. No tree is a mashpia or mekabel. Nothing in the world, nothing in our world and our planet is only a giver or a taker, because then it would be kinna b'maisa bereshis. There would be jealousy in maisa bereshis. Every single organism and every single piece of matter gives and takes. Everything is part of the cosmic ecosystem, let's call it, of give and take. Everything. The earth receives, but the earth gives. Every animal gets, and it also gives. Every tree gets, and it also gives. So therefore, every person has unique kishroinus that they give, and other kishroinus that they receive from others. We all are givers and takers, and you have to always figure out what's your tchum. So that's, of course, the first thing, that certain people are blessed with certain talents. But there was another major quality that was a prerequisite for Chozer and for Maniach. And that quality was the ability to really, really be able to listen to the Rebbe. Now, what do I mean listen? I don't only mean listen, that you listen. Listen means, I'll use the lashon of Chassidus, Hanachos atzmusay mamish. Hanachos atzmusay mamish, in simple English, means that when you listened, you could not be present. I couldn't even think about the fact that I'm not thinking about anything but the Sikha. Because if you were thinking about anything besides listening to the Rebbe's words, it was already a distraction. What is more, even if I was thinking, wow, this is a geschmack of art. You know, you hear sometimes something from somebody, say, wow, this is awesome, this is gewaldig, this is great. I remember myself, the Rebbe would sometimes ask a question or give an answer. And I had a taiva. I wanted to stop for a moment and kvel in the tainug, wallow in the geschmack, tell myself in my mind, what a beautiful, powerful geschmack of art. But the moment, if I did that, I remember I once did it, it was the worst distraction for Chazana. You know why? Because it means I'm not listening. That's already a tnua. In Lashon Achsidus, it's a tnua of yeshes. It's a tnua of, it's not bittul. It's not me, I'm not completely open. I'm not empty. Klei reikon machzik. Be completely empty. Empty, I don't mean here an apusta keli, that klei reikon. That klei reikon is not machzik. Here reikon, I mean a keli that's completely open. There was nothing in the world but the words, nothing else. Not my thinking about it, not my understanding it, not my processing it. If in the middle of a sikha you stopped to try to process what the Rebbe said, which is very normal, I want to get it. Oy va'avoy, you lost it. Now, it happens sometimes, and I knew I lost over there 2 minutes, and I'm like, oh my God, I lost it. Sometimes you hope that another chazer filled the gap, not always. So this was a very important yesod, to be completely vacant. Koyach ma, the nekuda of chachma, complete vacancy and openness, where the mind is completely suspended from any machshava of self, even of the self experiencing the sikha. There could be absolutely no intellectual assertiveness of self whatsoever, even in the slightest degree. You had to be mamish like a wet sponge. That's the reason, by the way, why children have such a powerful ability to absorb information. You know, children remember everything. You know why? Because they have bittul. They're completely open. As adults, when we hear something, we don't really listen. We have opinions. Even now, you're listening to me, you have an opinion about what I say. When I listen to somebody, oh, it's good, it's geschmack, it's boring, I heard this already. The moment you had opinions about the sikhis, you're not listening to the sikha. You had to forego the taiva of even the Torah taiva, the Chassidish taiva of enjoying it, of experiencing it. No, there's no experience. There's only the Rebbe talking. There's only divrei harav, nothing else. This is the Lashon HaGemara, Yosef be'emsa, you sit be'ema, u'biyira bereses u'bzir, you stand completely open. Later is already bina. This is chachma. Later is bina, where you have to chazed it and reconstruct it and understand it. This was number one. Number two was the sense of urgency and history. Imagine you knew that you're sitting at a mountain, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes down, and he's giving you over Torah that he's never going to say again. And if you don't listen and you don't tune in, it's going to be lost forever. That feeling of achrayus, of the schus, was the feeling that I had when the Rebbe spoke. We knew the Rebbe is not going to repeat this again. The revelations of Torah, nigla of Torah, halacha, pnimius, kabbalah, chassidus, machshava, all chelkei Torah, that the Rebbe is going to reveal now, he's not going to reveal again. That urgency, that sense of purpose, that sense of connection with the gadlus of the moment, with the history that is taking place right now, really creates a certain intensity and an urgency that allows you to tune in a way that you wouldn't tune into other things, as important and as beautiful as they are. Sometimes I can't remember a conversation from yesterday. But this was we knew that this is a special moment. It's not going to happen again. It's Shabbos, it's Yom Tov, there's no recording, there's no tape. You're responsible. The b'chin of chayev adam loymar b'shvili nivra ha'olam. The weekdays was taka very different because the Rebbe was recorded on a tape recorder. On a tape. There used to be such a thing called a tape. You'll ask you in Rosh Yeshiva what a tape is, I'll tell you. Of course, this is another major factor. The Rebbe didn't say before what he's going to talk about. He didn't give notes of what he's going to talk about. Sometimes he notified a Rashi is going to address, but even then, not many details. Sometimes a question, two questions. You knew that Rebbe was going to talk about the Parsha. You knew he's going to talk about a Rashi. You knew he's going to talk about a Rambam. It could be a heavy sugya in Rambam. You knew he could talk about another sugya, another inyan. You knew he's going to talk an inyan in the Zohar, in the hearts of his father and Zohar. You knew it may be a Shabbos. He may talk about Pirkei Avos. It's going to be a Maimech Chassidus. You knew, but the details you never knew. You never knew. And the Rebbe would quote from everywhere and everything. As you know, the Rebbe would quote, of course, Torah Shebiksav, from the whole Tanakh. The Rebbe would quote Torah Sheba'al Peh, from Bavli and Yerushalmi, and Sifra and Sifri and Tosefta and Medrashim and Zohar and Mechilta. Of course, Rambam and Rishonim and Achronim and Poskim and Sifrei Halacha. And of course, all the Svarim of the Alter Rebbe and Rabbi Seinu of Chabad, of Chassidus. And Bechlal, quotes from Svarim of Machshava or Svarim of Halacha. And the Rebbe would quote, and the Rebbe wouldn't always explain every quote and translate. Sometimes it was very bekitzer. So you really, really had to be, as much as possible, bahavant in learning and steeped in learning, in the Rebbe's style of learning. So even if I wouldn't know every quote where it's coming from, first of all, you had to try to learn as much as possible. You should be able to absorb as much as you can. But even if not, you had to know the Rebbe's style and mahalach so you could retain information even if you didn't understand it fully. And then later you can go and look up the sources and reconstruct it and understand it. Another very important quality in Chozer and Maniach is appreciating the Rebbe's mahalach hamachshava to the best of our ability. The Rebbe had a certain derech in learning. Not an easy derech to capture, but the Rebbe had a derech in learning. Just to give one example of that derech, the Rebbe said this Erev Shavuos Tavshin Lamed Beis, and he said it other times as well. Whenever the Gemara brings a name of somebody who said something, it's because you have to know the name in order to understand what he said. That's why sometimes the Gemara brings ideas, a memory without a name, just a statement. Could be from Bnei HaYeshiva, could just be quoted in Gemara. If it's with a name, it's because the name is relevant to the sugya, to the message. Now, you know what that really means? What that really means, the Rebbe said this. He spoke about the sugya of Amr Rabbi Yosef, Ilav HaYoyim Kagarim Kama Yosef Ike B'Shuk Psachim Samachas. The Rebbe said it's neged that it's Rabbi Yosef. A whole long Sikha Erev Shavuos Tav Shalom at Beis with a Hemshech on Shavuos, with a Hemshech on Shabbos Nase. So Siyum on Saita. Part of it is printed in Chelik Yud Gimel. The Rebbe spoke in a lot of Lishitoses of Rabbi Yosef and Shas. But what does this really mean? What this means is that all the Mamari Chazal that come from Rabbi Yosef are all connected. There's a psashita that Rabbi Yosef has, and if you know his name, you'll understand the ideas much better. So that means you have to know everything Rabbi Yosef said everywhere in Kol HaTorah Kula and see the connection. Now that was the derech of the Rogatchover that the Rebbe used to talk about. Now, to even start doing this, a person has to have a mastery of the whole Torah, but it was important to know that the Rebbe thinks in these terms, which the Rebbe used to say that it's very similar to the shit of the Rogatchover. We used to quote a Tosefta that Kol HaTorah Kula Inyan Echad. It's machlekes and Tosefta. If a Talmud asks something shaloike inyan, so Reb Meir says he can ask shaloike inyan. Chacham say Kol HaTorah Inyan Echad. The whole Torah is one inyan, and the Rebbe took this very seriously, because even though the Torah speaks about billions and billions and billions of inyanim, if you're mafshit it, if you can divest the particular story from its external manifestation and explore its core, its seed, the etzem of it, you'll see that a sugya in ribis, and a sugya in muktzah, and a sugya in ezikin, and a sugya in taris, and a sugya in kilayim or demai, and a sugya in chagiga or in edevin are all connected when you get to the neshama of it, to the pnimius of it. On the other hand, the Rebbe had very much the briske derech, which is really dissecting the sugya al-asar, taking it apart, compartmentalizing it, figuring out the pnimius of the sugya al-asar. One is the pchin of Soivav Kalalman, and one is the pchin of Amala Kalalman. And the Rebbe Mamish always tried to synthesize both, which is the union of Atzmus, which synthesizes Soivav and Amale. I hope you know what I'm talking about. And then, of course, there was the Rebbe's idea that every single halacha and mitzvah has a pnimius to it. Every mitzvah, every halacha, every story could be explained in Avodas Ha'adam. Every Rashi, there's a Yena Shel Torah, as the Alter Rebbe said. And the ability to synthesize completely the Nigla and the Pnimius, the Kabbalah and the Halacha, the Chitzonius and the Pnimius, the Guf and the Neshama, and that it's Mamish a Torah Achas. It was also, I'm just mentioning a few. I could mention 200-300 themes, but you had to become completely saturated with the Rebbe's Mahalach HaChaim and Mahalach HaMachshava. And because we had the schuz that the Rebbe spoke a lot over the years, and he wrote a lot of letters, and he edited a lot of sichos, and he said Maimorim, and he had this kontresim, etc. So it gives and it gave people the ability to, again, to the best of our ability, to be able to tune into this and really try to become bahavant with a cook, with the perspective of the Rebbe, how he looks at Yiddishkeit and how he looks at a Jew, and how you learn a Rashi, and how you learn a Tosfos, and how you learn a Rambam, and how you see a story in Chumash, and how you look at a contemporary situation. V'chuli, v'chuli. This was another major factor that allowed the Maniach to be able to try to do a successful job in transcribing the sichos. Now, I can tell you from experience and from what I have seen, nobody remembered the sichos verbatim. It's a myth if somebody tells you that somebody remembered the sichos word for word. That's not the case, at least not for the years when I was around. Earlier years, I can't tell you, but I don't think anybody remembered the sichos word for word. Some people remembered it exceptionally well, some not. Even if you remembered, there was remembering and there was understanding. Not always was it so easy to understand. The Rebbe could sometimes be meirich in a question, and another question, and then the answer he said so fast, and you couldn't even grasp it. It was sometimes very, very difficult to get. Rabbi Yoel once said that the Rebbe's mind was so fast that sometimes the Rebbe, his speaking couldn't catch up to his mind. So the Rebbe's mind was already finished, but the speaking, he didn't get to it yet. And the Rebbe had to tremendously be mitzamtzim, his ideas in the words. So sometimes the words did not, the Rebbe was thinking and the Rebbe was already ahead of it and the words didn't catch up to it. So the Rebbe didn't finish the subject. And you sometimes came out and it was very difficult to get. And this, I want to tell you another major important idea when you're Maniach a Sikha is, it's not always so easy to get the Sikha. The Rebbe could start off with something, go on to an Inyan, ask a question, go off to another Inyan. He answers it, but the answer may not be clear. You really have to listen and listen again, because sometimes there will be one nuanced statement, and there you'll chop it. And you could miss it, and you didn't get the Sikha. I have seen and heard people review Sikhas. I've seen and people who transcribed Sikhas, they didn't get it. They got words, but they didn't get the neshama. And here you have to have here's a klal. The Rebbe said this one summer, I think, Tovshem and Vaad, that every Farbrengen used to have one nekuda. If you don't see that, you didn't get it. Every sikha has one nekuda. One atzmi is the nekuda that pervades it. There is in the sikhas, just like in Torah, there's the guf of the sikha and there's the neshama of the sikha. The guf of the sikha is what the Rebbe is saying. The neshama of the sikha, I'm going to call the energy of the sikha, the message of the sikha, the revolution of the sikha, the game changer of the sikha, the paradigm shift of the sikha, the pnimiyis dika mahalach that the Rebbe is revealing in the sikha. That is very easy to miss. A lot of people miss it. I've told Bochurim over the years, how do you know when you're learning a sikha that you understood it? How do you know? If you can explain it to somebody else, but I'll tell you one of the ways you know. If you can explain to me afterwards that only the Rebbe could have said that, you understood it. If not, you probably did not understand it. Because every sikha has in it the unique stamp, the stempel, the atzmi is the anon nafshi ksavis yahavas, the tzadikim daimon lebayrim. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Kuvdalad, anoichi, anon nafshi ksavis yahavas. Or like the Rebbe said about the Baal Shem Tov, that an atzmi, I think Yud Shvat Tov Shem Chaf, an atzmi, whatever he says has his atzmiyus. So any Torah from the Baal Shem Tov tells you everything about the Baal Shem Tov. All you have to know from the Baal Shem Tov is one Torah, and you know everything about the Baal Shem Tov. But that Torah, you have to get to the etzem of the Torah, what we call today DNA. You take DNA from somebody's saliva or somebody's hair or somebody's nails, you have everything. You don't need more. One genome in one cell out of 50 trillion cells, but you have to get to the DNA level. If you just get to the chitzonius, you don't get the whole picture. And the Rebbe then showed one Torah of the Baal Shem Tov, it captured all of the Baal Shem Tov. With the Rebbe was the same thing. One Torah of the Rebbe captures the atzmius of the Rebbe, if you can get the atzmius of that Torah. Sometimes in a sikha, the Rebbe sometimes gets to the punchline, but the punchline he says so fast that you miss it. And you didn't really get the mohus of the sikh. And this takes a lot of learning, a lot of training. Most importantly, opening yourself up to the derech machshava of the Rebbe, to the Rebbe's tainug, his rotzen, his seichel, the Rebbe's way, how he looked at the world, how he looked at Torah, how he lived Torah, how he communicated Torah. And it's even hard to describe in words. I mean, I could talk about it a lot, but this is something you have to cultivate. And it takes, this is not a very simple thing to do. There's also something else. This I remember many sikhs. The Rebbe would go me'inyan, le'inyan, le'inyan, le'inyan. Yeah, I'll give you an example. Yud Shvat Tov Mem. The Rebbe made a siyum, 4 Mesivtas. Brachas, Nazir, Yevamis, Krisis, Bonayich. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Jacobson was there. It's a famous Farbrengens, 30 years, Yud Shvat Tov. The Rebbe said the siyum. The Rebbe asked a question. He quoted the Aruch L'Neir. The Aruch L'Neir on the 4 Mesivtas. The Rebbe started to ask questions on the Aruch L'Neir's Pirush. Why these 4 Mesivtas have this siyum. Then the Rebbe started to give a whole introduction why one has the right to ask a question on the Aruch L'Neir. The Aruch L'Neir was a Gadol B'Yisrael, was a Gaon Olam, was a major Talmud Chacham, has an extraordinary Pirush and Gemara. And the Rebbe says, the Rebbe is questioning himself that he's questioning the Aruch L'Neir. So the Rebbe went off kivayachal on a whole tangent explaining why he has to question the Aruch L'Neir, because Torah, the main thing is emes. And if you don't understand, darf man fragen. If you don't understand, you have to ask. I once saw a vart. Chaim Volozhiner writes, it says in Pirkei Avos, Yehi beischa beis Vaad lechachamim veheve misabek ba'afar ragleim. What's misabek? Misabek. So the way the Weltayr of misabek is from the word avok, dust, right? That you have to like sit in the dust of their feet for shoyse about someone's event. He touched misabek comes from the word vayevek, a battle, wrestling match. Misabek ba'afar ragleim. You have to be able to fight with them. In other words, a real Talmud has to be able to challenge his Rebbe. If man versteht nicht, darf man fragen, misabik, fight, in a good way. But ba'afar ragleim, with a bittul, with a derech eretz, it's a beautiful touch. This was the teichen in different words. The Rebbe was saying then about the Aruch L'nei. And then the Rebbe went into the whole arichis of machlokes and Torah. You thought that the Rebbe was just busy explaining why he's asking on the Aruch L'nei, but really how the Rebbe would do it is, from there he was already going into the Hadron on the Mesivtas, but the Rebbe didn't say, I'm going back. Sometimes the Rebbe would say, I'm giving a Maimer HaMuzger, parentheses, and then he would say, Ad Kan Maimer HaMuzger. But that was unique. Very often the Rebbe would give a Maimer HaMuzger, but from the Maimer HaMuzger he went right back to the whole Sikha, and you sometimes didn't get it. So these are things that you really have to notice. Sometimes the Rebbe would put in a part of the answer in the middle of the questions, and you had to really understand that. Sometimes the Rebbe would go from one subject to another subject, and he could cover in one sikha many subjects, and you don't see what's the connection. And at the end, the Rebbe says a line, and if you got that line, wow, that's the connection. These are all missing links where one had to really, really concentrate and tune in to the sikhs to really be able to grasp. Sometimes, of course, the Rebbe, knowing that the Olam didn't understand, we would ask questions after Shabbos. The Rebbe would either answer them, biksav, or not answer them, or sometimes speak about it the next Shabbos. Sometimes he would go to the next Shabbos. There could be sometimes a Farbrengen, a second one, a third one, a fourth one, and sometimes even more, where the Rebbe could continue one subject because of the many questions. Sometimes the Rebbe would give very sharp responses to the questions on the Farbrengens. If you didn't think through your questions right, the Rebbe was I don't want to say the word tough, I don't think the word is tough, but the Rebbe was a very exacting editor, a demanding editor. He wanted people to live up to very high standards. He did not appreciate laziness. The Rebbe did not appreciate negligence. The Rebbe did not like mistakes. The Rebbe did not like a lack of professionalism. He really didn't like when something was misquoted. He was very upset. And generally, if something was inaccurate, the Rebbe was very, very sensitive to the fact that things mamish have to be on the most emes. I remember once if I bring in Chai Elul Mem Zayin, the Rebbe spoke about the Rebbe Rashab, that he said that he heard 7 Torahs from the Baal Shem Tov in Gan Eden. The Rebbe Rayad said it over Tofresh Tzadik Zayin. Agav, the last 2 Torahs are missing. Not because the Rebbe Rayad didn't say them, he said them. But the Rebbe said that the Chozer, I remember, the Rebbe said the Chozer wrote Chozer, it's missing. The Rebbe said the Chozer, the Maniach wrote Chozer. We don't have the last 2 Torahs. I'm saying from memory, yeah. I have to look it up, but I think it was the last 2 Torahs. And the Rebbe said it's B'hashgacha Pratis. And the Rebbe explained why the last 2 Torahs are missing. Later, somebody told me that the Chozer was Reb Mordechai Mentlik. Mordechai Mentlik was one of the Rosh Hashivas of Hatmimim, and he was very ill. He had cancer, he had machla. He passed away Tishrei Memches after Sukkot. I still remember his last Rosh Hashanah in 770. We used to sit near him. My father, Olav Shalom, had a place near the White Wall and in front of Mizrach, and he sat there, so we sat close to him. But I believe that year he was so weak, he sat in the back, and I was there, and I remember him davening. So there was a Yesh Oimnim that the Rebbe wanted to speak about him and mentioned the Chozer of the Rebbe Rayatz, Tofresh Tzadik Zayin, that Mordechai Mentlik. It was one of the things they said after the Farbrengen. Of course, it's hard for us to know if it's accurate or inaccurate, but this was an interesting thing that the Rebbe said. It's B'hashgacha Pratis that the Chozer wrote Chozer, because L'Poel Mamish, it's missing in the Sikha. The Rebbe then asked a question. He said, it's bewusst that in Chabad, hat man nicht so gehalten von Moifsim. They weren't so into Moifsim, wonders. Chabad was more Chachme, Binne, Das, lernen, Nigle, lernen, Chassidus, verstehen, davenen, avoid Hamidus, not Moifsim. There wasn't a Chabad thing. It was the old word from the Kotzke, Oisus a Moifsim, Ba'admas B'neicha. So the Maniach wrote that. He wrote, Chabad, they weren't into Moifsim. I remember the Rebbe circled and wrote, I'm not saying verbatim because it's from Tavshin Mem Zayin. That's Nun Zayin, Samach Zayin. It's 33 years ago, so I'm not saying it verbatim, but more or less. The Rebbe wrote, Im Kain, Mahu, Hashturim, the Kriyas Yamsuf. If so, why do we make every day a Shturim about Kriyas Yamsuf? Chabad is not into Moifsim. Kriyas Yamsuf. Hashem split the sea. That's why every day I have to say Oz Yoshir and mention Kriyas Yamsuf in Shachris and mention Kriyas Yamsuf in Ma'ariv and Emes Ve'emun. Chabad not into Moifsim. The Rebbe could not. The Rebbe didn't want such a thing. We're not into Moifsim. The Rebbe said, so why do we celebrate Pesach? What happened on Pesach? Yitzias B'Tzem, given Hashem and Moifus. So maybe we should stop celebrating Pesach. We should stop celebrating Sukkot. We shouldn't celebrate Hanukkah. We shouldn't celebrate Purim. The Rebbe then fixed it and he said Chabad wasn't so infatuated only with Moifsim. In other words, the Rebbe minimized it. I'll give you another example, an interesting thing, very interesting thing. You could learn a lot from it. There was one week, Tovshin Mem Zayin, probably Parshas Vayetze, Shabbos Vayetze, Yud Kislev Tovshin Mem Zayin. That's the end of 1986. The Chag Agula of the Mittel Rebbe. So the Rebbe spoke about the difference of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe was Chachma, the Mittel Rebbe was Bin. And remember the Rebbe said, give a cook. You could look at their Maimonim. The Alter Rebbe, what he explains in 3 pages, by the Mittel Rebbe is 50 pages. A Maimah that goes, the Rebbe said, Sen Liker Amud. Dozens of pages by the Mittel Rebbe. You look in Torah Chaim, the Mittel Rebbe is Maimonim. Maimonim Admurem Tzai. You have a Maimah in Torah Vayetze Vayishlach. It's 2 pages, 3 pages, 1 page, 4 pages, 5 pages, and in Torah Chaim it could be 70 pages. You have to spend a good week or month on it. And the Rebbe said, the Alter Rebbe is the Nekuda, and the Mittel Rebbe is the Binah, Harchave, is Pashtus. And he brought a Lashon HaZoyar. You need the Nekuda beheichale. Heichal is the chamber, the big mansion, and Nekuda is the seminal point, like the beginning of it, the essence of it, like the tippa, the semen of the fetus. And then the woman, Ima, Chachma is Abba, and then Bin is Ima, she develops it and turns it into a beautiful baby with limbs and bones and organs. And after 9 months, it could come out. The Rebbe said that if you have Chachma without Bina, it's missing because it's not developed. It remains completely abstract and transcendent. But if you have Bina without Chachma, you have the hispashtus, but you don't have the essence. You have to go back to the Nekudas Hatamtus after Bina. And the Rebbe was quoting the Maimonim from the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe about Chachma and Bina to explain the Maimonim of the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe. The Maniach quoted the Maimonim from the original. So in one of the Maimonim it says, Nekuda beloy heichale loy mashamish klum. If you have only a Nekuda and it doesn't develop into a structure, it's purposeless, it's meaningless. It's valueless. You can't do anything with it. Loy meshamash klum. The Maniach put that lotion from the Maimed into the Sikha. The Rebbe wrote, I'm not saying it verbatim. I don't remember verbatim. It's 33 years ago. I'm telling you the Teichit. Mi hu zeh shekoisev kein b'negei la'admor hazakin. How can a person write such words about the Alter Rebbe? It says nekuda b'lo yechalim in terms of chachma. If I have an epiphany, an idea, and I don't develop it, so it's like mashamish klum. What's going to happen? It'll get forgotten. You have an idea, a beautiful flash, a lightning bolt goes into your mind, goes off in your brain. The aha moment. It's an epiphany. It's a hisgalus, like a barak hamavrik, a blitz suddenly. But if you don't take it and concretize it, write it down, chazir it, think about it, it's going to be forgotten. You're never going to get it back. That's the nekuda of the Maimer. But the Rebbe said how sensitive you have to be. If we're talking about the Alter Rebbe in the middle of I'm talking about an idea that comes into your mind. I'm trying to bring out to you how sensitive and how exact the Rebbe was when words are transcribed. A maim chazal, a posek, an idea, a svara, should be betachlis ha'emes, betachlis ha'kedusha. I'll tell you another interesting thing, Meretche. Chavdala Tishrei Tovshin Nun, the Rebbe made a siyum on Masechta Kelim. The Rebbe gave a on Masechta Kelim Perek Chavdalet. So the Kelim Chavdalet is known to those who know Mishnayos or those who are Avelim, and they say that Perek Shloisha Trisinheim. Shloisha Trisinheim. There are 3 types of shields. That Sikha, the Rebbe was Megala. He wrote a Ha'ara that it's the yahrzeit of his. It's the yahrzeit that he for his grandmother, Rebbe Tzin Rachel, who was murdered by the Nazis. The Rebbe's mother's mother, Rebbe Tzin Rachel. The Rebbe wrote then that when he was a young child, for some years in the summer, he would go to her in Nikolaev in Ukraine, V'tiplabi, and she would take care of me, V'chuli. So the Rebbe wrote in the Sikha then. The 3rd type of shield is Tris Shemesachan, is called Ditzas Harvayim, which means the joy of the Arabs. It's basically a little shield, which is a toy, a game. So it's tahir because it's not a regular keli, it's not a utensil. There's 3 types of shields. One is Tamei Tumas Midras, one is Tamei Tumas Meis, Mesachkin by Bekunfun, and then you have Tahir Miklum, the last Tris. It's the first mission in Kelim Chavdal. Chavdal Tishrei Tovshin. The Rebbe said a whole sikh. Beautiful, amazing sikh about Shloisha Trisin, Al Piniglan and Al Pichsidis. A moide gewaldike sikh. 3 types of Avelis, 3 types of Missa, 3 types of Neshamas. Gewaldike sikh. When the Rebbe said the sikh, the Rebbe said, I can't remember for sure. It's on tape, you can hear it. But the Rebbe said that it was a funny game, like a meshuna dike mischak that they played. There was just like there was no teichen to it. There wasn't a keli that had any human use. It's not like you used it as a table or as a bowl to eat or as a cup. Those are things that are makabel tumah. But this was just a little toy, so it's tahir miklum. So the Rebbe wrote on it. The Rebbe spoke about ditzas harvai. Is the other today's Shemasachkin by Bekunfun. You know what? I'm going to look it up. I can say it exactly. Let me see if I have it. We spoke about being accurate, so I'll also be accurate. Oh, I didn't realize what time it is. Okay, wow. Let me finish with this point, and then we'll go to questions. So the Rebbe said that Ditzas Harvayim, was a schoik and a hana meshuna by the Arabs. Hana meshuna by the Arabs, some strange hana. And so it was just like for a sport. So I can't remember exactly the words, but the Rebbe wrote on the side, he said, he was very shocked. He said, you don't know that most of the sports in Brooklyn, and I think the Rebbe wrote sports in English, sports, most of the sports in Brooklyn, Vachuli, are basically the same, where there's no actual substantial benefit from it. It's just for entertainment for the people who view it. So we use the word meshuna, that it's a weird thing. It's like we don't know about it. And the Rebbe said, you don't know that most sports, even in Brooklyn, etc., is exactly the same concept, which was quite incredible, quite amazing. I'll tell you another very interesting thing. You can learn a lot from this. Tovshin Mem Zayin, the Rebbe said, maybe, which sikh is it? Winter Mem Zayin. The Rebbe said that the Rebbe Rayat said, "Mit aufzuputzen in the kneplach." You have to polish the buttons. That's what's left. The uniform is ready, but you got to polish the buttons. The Rebbe said because the buttons are fine, but they can have dust. They can have dust. The Rebbe said the buttons, the kneplach can haben Staub. Of English, dust, or belaz, dust. So you have to polish it from the dust. Now, if you were a maniach, would you put in the English word? Doesn't really make sense. We're going to start translating every word in English. You would put in the Yiddish word, shtoib, dust. The Rebbe translated shtoib into dust. But would you put in the Yiddish word, the English word? It didn't really make sense. Yet we decided, the Rebbe said it, put it in. The Rebbe wrote on the word dust, the ha'ara, and he wrote al derech hatzachos, dust is da sitra achara. Dust is da sitra achara. From here we learned that Rebbe translated a word into English. In the Farbrengens, im reiku mikem wasn't so simple. It was a Rashatevis there. Dust sitra achara. If that's what the Rebbe was thinking when he translated, I don't know. He wrote it later, weiß ich nicht. But that's what the Rebbe did. Dust is da sitra achara. My dearest Bochurim lach, but I see the hour is late. I was supposed to speak for half an hour, and I see it's already an hour. So let me take some questions, okay? Let me take some questions. If there are, you can chat your questions, and I'll take them. But first, I'll respond to the questions that were written here. Some I answered, and some I didn't, so I'll answer them. What is the hardest part of being a maniach? Mesivtas Hatmimim of Toronto. The answer to that is I already discussed. Should we write whatever we hear as we're listening, or should we write down points every minute or two? That's a gewaldige question. You know, Mitzvah Yom Tov, they used to write the Farbrengens after Havdalah. There was no mic, because the Rebbe didn't daven Meir or make Havdalah. But my brother, Reb David Feldman, earlier years, there were other Chozerim, they would write down. So they usually wrote, as the Rebbe was saying, they tried to write every word, but as short as possible so they don't miss. But this is really, I don't know that there's one way of doing it. Should you write whatever you hear as you're listening? Yeah, but only if you're going to have a way to reconstruct that later, because it's not going to come out good. So you could write down every word, but then you have to go it over and make sure it makes sense. Or you could do the other way. You write down points every minute or two. Both are fine options. Obviously, the first way, you might get much more in terms of details. What's the easiest way to retain the sikh in memory? So I won't need to go back and watch it a second time before writing my Hanacha. Mesivtas Lubavitch, Chicago. So listen to what I said earlier about how to remember. Is it better to write the Hanacha in Yiddish or a language that you understand better? Yesh bazeh mashem bazeh. Obviously, writing it in Yiddish is the language of the Rebbe, so it has a tremendous maila. Writing it in the language you understand better has a maila as well. So I don't know what to tell you. There's a maila in this, there's a maila in this. Maybe you try both. One time do this, one time do this. How do you remain focused on the sikha and at the same time write down? This is Moshe Goldberg and Holotaira. Ooh, that's a good question. It's very hard. When you're writing down, you just have to completely tune into the words. It's very hard to do both. To stay focused on the sikha to write, then I don't know how you can do both. If you're really writing, unless you're writing every few minutes, unless you're listening, and every few minutes you just write down a line to capture it. But if you're mamish continuously writing, then you just have to tune into those words, and later you'll reconstruct it, and you can go back and listen again. Moshe Malul, Mesivtas, Teres Menachem on Trio. While you're writing notes of what the Rebbe is saying, the Rebbe is going further. How do you keep track of what the Rebbe is saying while you're taking notes? It's very hard. It's very hard. You have to learn shorthand. You have to learn how to capture 20, the Rebbe is saying, speaking 30 words, how to capture that in 5. Can you do that? Sometimes we would underline a word like 3 times because you wanted to make sure you don't lose that word. But that's very hard. Listen, you're not going to be able to write down every word of what the Rebbe says because after 2 minutes, you'll already be stuck. The Rebbe will be way ahead of you. You have to find a way of either writing everything, but in short, so you have Rosh Tevis, or you just know how to capture something in a few words, and later you will understand how to go back and develop it, because that can't be the final Hanacha. Or you wait till the Rebbe finishes an idea, and you just capture that in a sentence very, very fast, because you don't want to miss the next idea. But don't expect perfection in this area. This is a very challenging task, because the Rebbe said a lot, and he said it fast, and he said it not always fast, but sometimes fast, and it's brief. What makes a Hanacha a good Hanacha? What can we do to improve? Mesivtas of Coral Springs. What makes a Hanacha a good Hanacha, in my eyes, is a few factors. Number one, that it's readable. You can understand it. It's readable, okay? Which means you have to have punctuation marks, you have to have question marks, hyphens, periods, quotation marks, colon points. You have to have paragraphs. I saw today a few Hanachas, no paragraphs. You have a page, 50 lines, run-on sentences connected to each other. That's not a Hanacha that's readable. You have to follow the laws of grammar. Look at the sichos. Look at the sichos of the Rebbe. The Rebbe's, there's a paragraph, another paragraph, another paragraph, another paragraph. There's sentences. Do you know, you also have to learn some grammar. Do you know the difference of a colon and a semicolon? You know the difference? It's very important. You won't be able to understand Likutei Sichos without it. What's a dash? What's a hyphen? Why are some words italic? These are all principles. Without this, you will not understand the sichos that are printed in Likutei Sichos. Impossible. So you have to follow that. For Hanacha to be good, it has to be readable. It should follow punctuation rules. Learn Likutei Sichos and follow those punctuation rules. That's number one for a good Hanacha. Number two, you should be able to understand it. First of all, it should be readable. The concept should be clear. It should be understood. And of course, number three, the most important is it should capture what the Rebbe was saying, the truth of what the Rebbe was saying, and the spirit of what the Rebbe was saying. Those are the 4 factors that make a good Hanacha. Sometimes you'll have 3, you won't have the 4th. Sometimes you'll have some, and you won't have the others. But those are the 4 factors that make a good Hanacha. First of all, it's readable. Number 2, it's understandable. The ideas are conveyed clearly. Number 3, it's loyal to what the Rebbe was saying. And number 4, it captures the soul of what the Rebbe was saying. I heard Mendel Greenberg from Detroit, Mesivtas. I heard that around Tov Shenun there was a change in the way the Rebbe said sichos, and there was a radical change in who did Chazar and how the Chazara worked. Is this correct? Can you tell us what did these changes consist of? Yeah, absolutely. And the answer to that is, by the way, before I get to this, the boys, you can ask your questions on chat, right? Rabbi Yitzchak Jacobson, do they know this? I don't know where they're supposed to chat to, but you could send a chat. Maybe you could tell them where they could chat to.
Yes, they could send them to me. If they can't send it to you directly, they can send it to me, and you'll send it
to me.
Yeah.
So if you want to ask a question, you can ask a question. In the meantime, I'm in the middle of Mendel Greenberg about what happened. Okay, so after the Rebbetzin passed away on Chav Beis Shvat Tavshin Mem Ches, the Rebbe started to Farbrengen every Shabbos. There were already some changes noticeable. First of all, the Rebbe spoke lower, a little more brief, a little more bekitzer. But it was in the summer where this real changes started. First of all, the last mimer was Shabbos Chukas Tavshin Mem Ches, if I'm not mistaken. After that, the Rebbe did not say Maimonim anymore. There were a few exceptions, like Erev Pesach Memtes and Erev Shavuos Tovshin Memtes. Very few exceptions when the Rebbe said Maimonim. So the Rebbe stopped saying Maimonim on Shabbos, even a Maimer Ke'ein Sicha. You know, there were two types of Maimonim. Then the Rebbe had a system of Farbrengens. The first Sicha was usually on the Parsha or on the Shabbos. The second Sicha was also on the Parsha on the Shabbos or Yom Tov. The third was a Maimer, and then would start the Rashi Sichas, the Zoya Sichas, the Rambam Sichas, Perkeyavas Sichas, sometimes Eretz Yisrael Dika Sichas, other Sugyas. The Rebbe would be Mashlim, Asiyah Mesechta from a previous Farbrengen, or another explanation. The Rebbe would respond to certain situations, questions, but there was a structure. You knew exactly the first two Sichas, number 3 was a Maimer, and then after that was the second half of the Farbrengen. It was a clear structure. In the summer of Tovshin Memches, the Rebbe stopped that. I think the Rebbe stopped talking, the Rebbe stopped Zohars, and the Rebbe stopped at some point Rashi Sichas, and the Rebbe started to speak about the Rashi Sicha, the first Sicha, the Rashi, the first Sicha. The whole structures of the Farbrengen stopped. This was already before Tovshin. Summer Memches, it started, and it got more and more and more dramatic. In the winter of Tovshin Memtes, the Farbrengen started to get very short, much shorter, Pashat in time. I remember Vayera, I think, I'm saying from memory, I think Shabbos Vayera, the Rebbe finished the Farbrengen a little after 3, which was shocking to the people, because the Farbrengens would usually finish much later, an hour or 2 or 3 later. So it was a little after 3. I remember people were blaming poor Chazan Talashevsky, because Chazan Talashevsky would wait for the Rebbe to tell him to sing Yehi Ratzain, and the Rebbe would make like with his head as a little tnua, and Chazan Talashevsky would wait. That was his thing, to sing Sheyibana Beis Hamikdash at the end of the Farbrengen, and it was around 3:10 or 3:15 or 3:20, and the Rebbe looked in his direction and maybe made a little nod, and he right away jumped up in Yehi Ratzain, and right after that the Rebbe finished the Farbrengen. So poor Chazan Talashevsky, they blamed him that he did Sheyibana Beis Hamikdash too early, but I really don't think it was him. I really don't know about this. If the Rebbe wanted to speak further, he could have spoken after the Nigun Sheyibana Beis Hamikdash. But this already meant that everything is changing. And then afterwards, the Rebbe, many Shabbosim didn't speak a Rashi Sich anymore. He stopped with the Zohar. The Rambam, I think the Rebbe used to speak most Shabbosim. The Maimorim, I told you, stopped. Everything changed. Another thing that changed in those years, the Rebbe spoke physically lower. Another thing started, that the Rebbe would start speaking very bekitzer, which means instead of elaborating on something barichas, the Rebbe would say a nekudna, and he would say, Kemeduber barichas lefierech b'svadas shalifneza, or just Kemeduber b'svadas shalifneza, or Kemeduber b'svaduya shalif, as we spoke in a previous Farbrengen. Sometimes he would say like we spoke in previous years. Another thing that happened was, especially as time progressed, the Rebbe started the Farbrengen with the inyan of Geula. I remember Parshas Miketz Nun Aleph, the Rebbe said, when you're tzekocht in something, you find in everything a connection to that. And he said, now the koch is Geula. So the Rebbe said, Parshas Miketz, right away the connection to Geula. And sometimes, after 2 or 3 minutes, the Rebbe would already start with a bracha for Mashiach. But that bracha could continue for a half an hour. And from the bracha, the Rebbe was really discussing the theme of the Farbrengen. So it became very, very difficult to grasp it, because the whole structure was completely transformed. I still remember it. I think it was Shabbos B'chukoisai Tovshin Memtes. I think it was an hour Sicha, and I'm not exaggerating, the Rebbe covered probably more than 100 topics. He went from one theme to another theme to another theme, and the Rebbe was saying ideas, but he did not give an idea more than a minute or a half a minute. The Rebbe would just reference it, say an idea. So it was very, very difficult to grasp. And not all of it was remembered. I'm telling you honest. For sure there were things that were forgotten. We did the best we can, but some of those Farbrengens were very difficult. The Rebbe could start off with the Geula, some theme connected to the Gula, and then 2 or 3, 4, 5 minutes later, he would start with a bracha. The Rebbe would say, that we should see bepoil mamish there was a vados is verbunden, and this is connected. And he could discuss a Rambam, and he could discuss a Yerushalmi, and he could discuss a Yom Tif, and he could discuss the Parsha, and he could discuss a Gemara, and he could discuss a Maimon L'Kut Torah, and he could discuss something that's going on in the Jewish world, but it was all in a bracha, and then it would go back to the bracha. So in those years, the whole structure changed. Some Farbrengens were different than others, but it was very hard to know. But the original structures of Farbrengens of the previous years ceased. So it was, and as I told you, it was very bekitzer, so it was not easy. It was not easy to grasp. If you want to really understand what I'm saying, you could listen to a tape of the Sichos of the Rebbe, Yud and Yud Aleph Elul, Tovshin Nun Aleph, Parshas Kiseitze. It was the days of the pogrom after Yankel Rosenbaum's murder in Crown Heights. Those Sichos, I don't remember, a half an hour, an hour, and you listen to those Sichos, you'll see that Rebbe discussed dozens and dozens and dozens of topics, very deep. But it's so difficult to understand the structure and the pervading theme, the chut hamakasher of the Sicha. I still remember, because I wrote a Hanacha of it. It was from weekday, so we had a tape. But to understand it, the Rebbe, I remember he spoke about Kiseitze, La Melchama Alevecha. He spoke about Kibbutz Goliath, May Arba Kanfis Haaretz. From there, the Rebbe went in to Tzitzis, Arba Kanfis. From there, he went into Miruboyas, corners that are square. And from there, the Rebbe went in to discuss the 2 types of tzimtzumim that are discussed in Kabbalah, tzimtzum b'derech meruba and tzimtzum b'derech igul. And you had to figure out the connection between all of these things. So it was extremely, extremely intricate and profound and full of remazim. And it was sometimes very, very difficult. An interesting thing to think about it was Tesvav Siv and Tavshim Mem Tes. The Rebbe came back from the oil very late. If I'm not mistaken, was one of the latest Mincha and Maidivs. And I saw when the Rebbe came back, the Rebbe looked very, very exhausted. And then the Rebbe said a sicha about Shnei Ksuvim HaMakishim Zeh Tshuva HaKosav HaShlishi Ve'Achriya B'neiah. And I have to tell you, it was like a throwback from the older years. And it was almost the middle of the night. The Rebbe didn't eat a whole day. He was fasting. So organized, from our perspective, Das Tachten. Organized, clear. I remember Shabbos, the Rebbe continued it. Shabbos Nosai. Shnei Ksuvim HaKishim Zeh. The Rebbe asked them why you need 2 psukim to fight with each other, and then you need a Kosav HaShlishi. Don't make a machloikas, and you don't need a Kosav HaShlishi. The Rebbe said amazingly that you need the contrasts, you need the extremes, because each pasuk gives you an extreme, and if you don't have that, you're missing it. You're just going to have a compromised life. You need to have this extreme, you need to have this extreme, and then you have to have a Kosav HaShlishi. And he explained the idea of Dira B'Tachtoinim, Atzmos, Tachtoinim, and then you have a Kosav HaShlishi. It was hafladik. Another interesting thing is the last Farbrengens, Shabbos Vayakel, was unusual. The first sikha was, I think, 55 minutes, close to an hour, maybe, I think around 55 minutes. And most of the topics were with tremendous arichas, tremendous husband. The Rebbe spoke loud, even by the bleachers they can hear. Remember, I told somebody, Mitzvah Shabbos Vayakel, it was a pella how the Rebbe spoke today. The Rebbe explained himself much more, which in the later years, the Rebbe relied much more on the previous year's sikhs. So Chazorah became much more difficult. There were some people who would quit a little bit because they would just, it was very hard to retain. It was not, some Farbrengens were very hard to retain. Is it better to write word for word how the Rebbe said it, or better the points, the question, the answer, Mesivtas Lubavitch, Chicago? Yesh bazeh ma she'ein bazeh. There's a gewaldige meile in Oisius Harav, because Oisius Harav is sacred. It's like a b'chin of Shchina Medaberes, Mitoch Groinoi. There's something that Chassidim cherished Oisius Harav k'moi she'ein, without anything. There's also a gewaldige meile in having the idea concrete, compacted, clear. Again, I say yesh bazeh ma she'ein bazeh. Both are excellent. Obviously, for readers, the points are much easier to grasp. for yourself, both are good. I would not, there's an advantage of this and an advantage of this. Shnei Ksuvim Archishim Zeze. Moshe Aaron Garzinski, Eirel Chanan Chabad. When writing a Hanacha, you're supposed to write everything that Rebbe says, or should you try to summarize it as short as possible in your words? The answer is, again, there's a tremendous advantage in the first and in the second. Sometimes I would do this, sometimes I would do this. Each one is exceptional. To write exactly and everything that Rebbe says is very, very valuable. I don't have to explain. To summarize it as short as possible in your words is also very advantageous because it makes it yours. Remember, in our work of teaching and communicating, I can't always repeat word for word what the Rebbe said. I have to make it mine. I have to internalize it. I have to see how I'm going to give it over. I have to know what works for the audience. This is explained in Chassidus as pre-tzimtzum and post-tzimtzum. Pre-tzimtzum is you have the oir the way it is, unfiltered, unadulterated, uncompromised. That's pre-tzimtzum. Post-tzimtzum is through a filter. Everything is mitzumtzum. Which one is better, the oir before the tzimtzum, the oir past the tzimtzum? What's the answer, Chevra? No, the oir before the tzimtzum, that's where it is. That's emes, ain't soif. But did it b'tachtoinim, you need the oir after the tzimtzum. So that's my answer to your Hanachos. There's pre-tzimtzum Hanachos and there's post-tzimtzum Hanachos. No, which is better? B'chlal by Bochurim montzich mer far tzimtzum, pre-tzimtzum. You'll have time for Nachen tzimtzum later. Now, this age is better pre-tzimtzum. Dudi ehrlich Mesivta Hatmimim and Tranto. How can what we're doing, is it considered Hanachos? If we miss something, we can go back to the video and listen. Manichim, we're not able to do that. That's true. By the weekdays, we can also go back and listen, but it was still a Hanacha. Just because you can go back and listen doesn't mean it's not a Hanacha. We used to write Hanachos from the Farbrengens in the weekdays. It was still a Hanacha, even though we can go back and listen. What you're doing is, you're doing a tremendous thing because you're doing it for yourself. It's a gift for yourself, and it's a gift for everybody you're going to come in contact with now and throughout your entire life. How are you able to keep in your mind what the Rebbe said till after Shabbos? How are you able to retain all that information? Klurman, Mesivta, Miami, great question, and I addressed it earlier in my words. New Haven, what do you need to include in your Hanacha in order for it to be a Hanacha? Every detail or main points? The main points are critical. The details give it, of course, more accuracy. But the main points, I think, are the main points. Is it okay to rewrite the order of the Sikha to make it flow better and not go in the order that Rebbe went? Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It just has to be clear that you're organizing it, but it's okay. In fact, the Rebbe wanted the Hanacha should be written that way. The Rebbe wanted the Hanacha should be written in the way that everything is clear and categorized. So if the Rebbe said something at the end of the Sikha, which really was part of the questions, the Rebbe would expect it to be put into the questions. The way that we used to do it is, there was somebody who would type up the Sikha from the weekdays word for word, usually Tzvi Hirschnatik in my years. He would take the Farbrengen or the Sikha from the weekdays and type it up word for word. If the Rebbe repeated himself, he would put in this repetition. The Rebbe said a word 3 times, he would put it in. It was word for word. And then we worked with that transcript word for word and wrote based on it, but very often organized it in different ways. I would like a tip how I can get every point that Rebbe is saying on paper, how to keep up with the Sikha. What points do I put down? How do I put them down? Where do the commas and periods go? Can I put my commentary on the Sikha? I answered some of this before. You could put your own commentary on the Sikha, but I think your commentary should be either at the end or in the beginning or in middle. You can have brackets and give your own commentary. That's fine. It's actually nice, but it should be clear that this is your commentary. And I encourage all of you, when you finish a Hanacha, to give commentary in the sense of really making sure you got it and putting it in context of other sikhs. And here's the most important thing. What did I take out of it? What did I learn from this? Where can I change from this? What did I learn new in my head? What did I learn new in my heart? This is a great thing to do. being on weekday Farbrengens, there were recordings. Was Shabbos the only day that the Chozer had to remember, or also weekdays? Remembering was only on Shabbos in my years. The early years, not necessarily, because I didn't even know if there was always a tape and it wasn't always available. Has the Rebbe spoken or encouraged anything to the Manichim about being a Maniach? In the earlier years, there was. In my years, not that I know of. How long approximately? My father once told me that the Rebbe mentioned something to him on Yechidus and Tov Sheman Ches. How long approximately did it take you to write up a Hanacha? It took a very long time. It was not easy to write a Hanacha. Hanacha could take a whole night, a whole day, sometimes a whole week you worked on it. A Farbrengen, a whole Farbrengen. Sometimes it was a good few days, a whole week. How long should it take for us Bochurim to write a Hanacha on a 20-minute video? It could take a whole day. If it takes a few hours, it's not surprising. It's a few hours and you look it over and review it. It could take a whole day. Sometimes it could take 2 days if you're doing a good job. Let me see if there's any other questions.
I just received one question, so I'll just mention that Rabbi Jacobson collects the others. If the Chozerim sometimes were challenged, did they ever rely on the crowd for help of Chazar? If they didn't remember anything, did they ever rely on the crowd for Chazar? Were there such instances?
Not that I know of. I mean, those of the crowd who were really qualified were somehow connected to Chazara, meaning there were Balabatim or Yidden who were big Talmidei Chachamim, and they may have not been Chozerim in terms of their career or vocation, but they were, known to be involved. They would sit by the Farbrengens, they would kochzich in the Farbrengens. So obviously, a Chozer may call them or discuss it with them. So that was common. But again, those who would be asked were people who on a good day were involved. So they were like somehow connected, because in Chozerim itself, there were different levels. There were those who mamish did it, Yom V'Layla, this was their thing a whole week. And there were those who did it when they were Bochurim and later moved on. But say they stayed connected. And then there were those who, they were somehow involved on some level in one way or another. So there was, in Chozerim themselves, there were quite a few different madregas and different categories. The two Manichim ever have a dispute over what the Rebbe said. Yeah, of course, there were always disputes. Rabbi Yoel Khan would make a Chazor Mitzvah Shabbos downstairs in 770 in my years. And there were often a lot of arguments. The Rebbe said this, the Rebbe said that, the Rebbe meant that, the Rebbe meant that. Rabbi Yoel himself would sometimes get upset with one of the Chozerim or the people there by Chazor and say, Narishkeit and Shtusim, he didn't understand. But there were debates. There were debates, first of all, what the Rebbe said. Did the Rebbe say this? Did the Rebbe say that? Sometimes the debates were understanding what the Rebbe said. That too. It wasn't an argument on the words, but it was an argument on understanding. It happened constantly. Sometimes big debates, sometimes important debates about what the Rebbe said. There was no question. And remember, there were Hanachos the Rebbe saw and the Rebbe wrote very often. The Rebbe wrote pretty often. Kinire loy tafsu kol ha'inyan. It seems like you did not understand the whole theme that I said. There was once that Rebbe wrote on a Hanacha, and not as a compliment, word for word from the tape. Ois ba'ois, mila b'mila me'at tape. And the Rebbe was not very happy about that. In other words, his point is, you took the tape and you typed it up, and the whole Hanacha is word for word from the tape. The Rebbe did not want that. Because speaking and writing is never the same. Unless you're speaking or written, unless you're saying something that you wrote, like you're communicating a speech that you wrote, the world of speaking and the world of writing is two different worlds. Because in speaking, you can get away with things. You can repeat yourself, the way you connect sentences, etc. In writing, you have to be much more concise and much more brief. You can't repeat yourself, because if you're repeating yourself, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing this? The person just read it. So writing is a completely different creature than speaking. And the Rebbe knew that, of course, and the Rebbe expected that. Don't just write word for word from the tape. edit it, make it compact, make it sharp, make it concise. I remember that Rebbe once wrote to us after Yom Kippur, I think Tov Shenun or Nun Aleph, one of the later years, the Rebbe said, B'chlal, when you put something on paper and you're sending it to print, you have to do it b'kitzer. The Rebbe wrote, because he X'd out a paragraph, which was explaining more the previous paragraph. The Rebbe said, B'chlal, the klal is as brief as can be. Don't make it flowery. The Rebbe was not a chassid of making it flowery. B'kitzer, even though in speaking sometimes, he was much more elaborate. So there were arguments. Sometimes the Rebbe wrote sharp comments on certain Hanachos. The Rebbe was not always pleased. The Rebbe once wrote on a sikha that it's malei chidushim mamish, meaning this sikha is filled with real chidushim. And it sounded like chidushim that even he was not thinking about when he said them. There were different comments. The Rebbe once wrote something very sharp on a sikha. He said, I put a lot of patches. You remember? I don't know if you remember the olden days, kids a lot of times had torn pants and mommy couldn't afford another pair of pants. So they put lattice patches all over the pants. You can have 10 patches on your pants or 5 patches. It was called in Yiddish lattice. It's still called in Yiddish lattice. So the Rebbe wrote, Gam la'achere kol ha'lattice eze oizen yeshla, aza oizen yeshla. Even I patched up the sikha and it still looks horrible. The Rebbe once wrote, I think more than once, after 30 years, I'm not going to teach you Aleph Beis. After 30 years, I'm not going to teach you Aleph Beis. So the Rebbe was often very sharp. As I told you, the Rebbe wanted excellence. The Rebbe believed in people, and especially people who were writing his own Torah on his behalf. The Rebbe wanted excellence. And the Rebbe, and it was not always excellence. People are people, and people are flawed. Another important thing, let me answer this. Who was the main machriya in the Hanacha? Rabbi Yoel? I don't know if it was always Rabbi Yoel. Rabbi Yoel, obviously, all the years that he wrote, he was the writer and the machriya. I think he was often the machriya, very often the machriya. If he was always the machriya, I don't know if he was always the machriya. Of Dafka, I guess I would be accurate in saying that it basically boiled down to the person who was writing it, at the end of the day, in most cases. But Rabbi Yoel was often the machriya. Of course, sometimes they would ask the Rebbe would often answer, and the Rebbe would sometimes not answer. The Rebbe would answer b'ksav, or sometimes answer at another Farbrengen. Sometimes the answer was very elaborate. Sometimes the answer was very brief. Sometimes the answer was very sharp. There were times that Rebbe would answer, especially on Rashi Sichos, he would say, Yishalu bein chamesh lemikra. And go ask a 5-year-old child and he'll tell you the answer. He'll tell you the answer. I still remember it was one year Truma. When was it? Truma, Vav, Zayin. The Rebbe spoke about the Rashi, that the kapyrus, the lid on the aron was oivya tefach. It had the thick of a tefach. And the Rebbe said, how does Rashi know? Why does it belong in Pshutish Lamikra? It doesn't say in Chumash. Why does Rashi have to put it in? And the Rebbe said then that it has to do with understanding how gold works. If anybody knows how gold works, when you have a lid of gold covering the whole aron, it's going to cave in. And Rashi knew that every child who learns this knows if you know about gold, it's going to cave in. So Rashi has to say, oh, how did it not cave in? So he has to say that it was a tefach. A very interesting answer. So there was a question the Manichim sent in the middle of the week after Shabbos. I don't remember the whole answer, but I still remember that Rebbe told them they should go home and try it out with cardboard. The Rebbe said, go. He gave them an arts and crafts directive. Go and yenasu bekarton v'kayotza bazeh. Go try it out with cardboard or something similar. V'yispalu mehatoitzois, and they will be shocked from the results. The Rebbe gave them Manichim arts and crafts directives. I'm telling this to you from memory. This is Mem Zayin. It's how many years? Nun Zayin. So again, 34 years ago. So I could be a little inaccurate, but it was once the Rebbe made a picture. I remember Chav Cheshen Memdala, the Rebbe spoke about Aleph, and the Rebbe said that they used to make pictures of the letters. So they made a picture of somebody carrying two buckets of water, a Wasserträger, a stick on his back, and 2 buckets were hanging for an aleph. So I don't think they understood clearly what the Rebbe meant. So in the Hanacha, the Rebbe made a picture. The Rebbe made a picture of the person carrying the buckets. There were a lot of fascinating things. I remember this happened with me. The Rebbe spoke about the pasuk in Kisavai, Es Hashem ha'emircha hayom, right? Es Hashem ha'emircha hayom. Es Hashem ha'emarta, Hashem ha'emircha, right? Ha'emarta ha'emircha. So the Rebbe spoke about ha'emarta ha'emircha. So we quoted a Rashi. Rashi says, I think it's a Rashi in Brachas. So Rashi says, K'moy yisamru kol poyalei oven. Those who do wicked things, those who do iniquities, yisamru, they boast, they brag, they're proud of themselves. So it means you have boasted, you have glorified Hashem, and Hashem has glorified you. K'moy yisamru kol poyalei oven. In those years, especially the early years, the Rebbe was very, very sensitive about Lashon Nakiya. Always, the Rebbe was always sensitive. But the later years, the Rebbe was very makbid to speak positive about everything, about every Jew, about every phenomenon. Rashi says, "Kama yisamru kol poyalei oven." So I guess we could have written chulu, but I didn't. I wrote out the whole Rashi. Kama yisamru kol poyalei oven. The Rebbe added via shloimar, the mirame is bazeh al mailas es hapcha. Rashi intimates the mile of transformation. Right away, the Rebbe took a poyalei oven and he said, "The psarem, what's vikumta yisamru kol poyalei oven to us Hashem emirch?" It's 2 opposites. Here you're glorifying the Rebbeinu Shalom, and here your sinners are glorifying themselves. Yeshloim with the Miram is Almailas is Hapch. It showed how the Rebbe did not forfeit an opportunity to transform darkness into light. There was one year the Rebbe said that those who didn't get mashke should go in tomorrow to Maskidis and get mashke to bring home for Farbrengens in their city. So in the Sikha, the Maniach wrote it. So the Rebbe made a star on they should go into Maskidis, and he wrote V'ha'ikir lihikones linyane zecher v'zikaron ein drushe parsha zocher b'Torah. Which means the Rebbe is going into Maskidis. Now, a person is reading a Sikha, a week later, he's not going into Maskidis. Maskidis is the secretariat. So the Rebbe says the main thing is to go into Maskidis, to go into the concept of Zecher, Zikaron, remembering. Look at the Maimonim of Parsha Zocher, what the concept of Zikaron is. You saw here the diuk in a word. Next question. Okay, next question. How did the Hanacha work for Nosoi Nun Aleph? Ooh, you're bringing up memories. Nosoi Nun Aleph. You know what Nosoi Nun Aleph is? Nosoi Nun Aleph, we'll never forget. It was Yud Beis Sivan, I think, right? Somewhere that time. That zip code. It was Shabbos afternoon. 770 was usually empty. It was a long Shabbos. The Farbrengens ended hours earlier. My cousin made up a kiddush. I think he had a daughter. I had a cousin who made a kiddush on Lefferts. So I went to the kiddush. I was there with my brother. We were walking home. We were walking down Kingston Avenue. I think we were chazaring the Farbrengens from Shabbos. I had to give chazarim at Shabbos. Somebody runs over to us and says, "The Rebbe is Farbrengens." Okay, I thought the guy, the Rebbe's Farbrengens, Shabbos afternoon, it was almost Ma'ariv time. It was Shkia time. The Rebbe's Farbrengens. My brother said, "It's impossible. Check it out." So I checked it out. I ran. I came into 770. They were starting the niggin of B'nai Hechala. The Rebbe came in, he washed, he went to his bimah, the Rebbe ate a little challah, he said a short sikha, and then they sang all the nigunim of the Rebbeim. Then the Rebbe said another longer sikha, and then I think another sikha. I came in, they started B'nai Hechala. There wasn't a big oilam, but the pushing was incredible because the oilam was coming in, and it was a shock. So I knew that I'm going to have to remember this Farbrengen, and the pushing was unbearable. I couldn't get to the front. It was just impossible. I couldn't get to the front. So what I did was I climbed up on a beam, one of those beams, because among the crowd, it was just impossible. You couldn't concentrate. I climbed up on a beam and I held on like this to the beam. And I heard the sikha, the next sikha I heard it well. But it was not easy because I had to hold on to the beam and people were pushing me down because I was blocking them. It happens to be Rabbi Yosef was behind me on a table. And I saw that he was telling people they shouldn't push me down because it was hard. It was hard to hear, but I could hear because I was close. So I think they stopped pushing me down. So I got to hear the second sikha well. And I think the third sikha, I pushed it, got very nauseous. I got nauseous. I couldn't stay there anymore. My system. And when the Rebbe finished, I right away plopped down and I ran out. I went upstairs to the sink near the Yichud room, near the Shmuel's room, near WLCC, and I threw up. I threw up over there. And that was that. But I had the schus to write the Hanacha of, I think, the last two sikhas. The second sikha was a pretty long sikha. I don't know if you know, we still don't know what happened at that Farbrengen. It was a sudden Farbrengen, 8 o'clock at night, with Koshel Bracha, right after Matan Torah. An interesting thing is, I'm not saying this as a fact because I don't know. I'm just telling you my own feelings, right or wrong. That Shabbos was an incredible, incredible miracle. Mivtza Shloima, they called it. You know, right? Israel brought thousands of Ethiopian Jews. They kidnapped them. And they brought them illegally on airplanes to Eretz Yisrael, saving their lives. They took them from Sudan. They were guaranteed a death. Thousands and thousands of Jewish men, women, children, Ethiopians were brought to Eretz Yisrael that Shabbos. It was a secret, top secret. The person who gave all the planes just passed away a few months ago. Extraordinary human being. It's a whole parsha. What's my mucker for this? We heard the story afterwards, and then I thought the two are maybe connected. But also the second sikha, the Rebbe spoke a lot about Shlomo HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech was called Mivtza Shlomo because Kush, Ethiopia, Shlomo HaMelech had, his relationships, his connections. The Rebbe spoke about Shlomo a few times in the Sikha, Pada B'Shalom, Shlomo HaMelech, Shlomo Melech and Shlomos. He spoke about his name, the Beis HaMikdash by Shlomo. Just telling you a hergish. I had maybe one Inyan that was connected to that Farbrengens, perhaps not. That was Nosein and Aleph. The first Sikha I didn't chazah because I wasn't there yet. I missed the first Sikha. Next, you should be, okay, I'm just looking for did the Rebbe say clearly that the way my modem and Sikha should be written and printed considerably different than the Rebbe said it? Because you want to get the Teichen written down, and it might be different from the way you want to say it. Is this also could be that the Maimorim recorded when they were written Bilti Muga, some paragraphs are in a different order? Yeah. Over the years, the Rebbe was very clear how to write something. And now listen, there were many writers. You have to understand something. When Manichim write things, it's the Rebbe's it's the Rebbe's works, but it's the way it's filtered through their talents, through their pen, and through their brain, and through their heart. It's very important to understand that. Manichim are people. Sometimes they were exceptional Manichim. Some were extraordinary writers. Some were not. Some grasped an amazing way. Some grasped less. Some grasped deeper. Some grasped more superficial. Some more complex, some more clear, some more intricate, and some more klolizdik. With some manichim, there's a lot bein hashuris. There's a lot that's unsaid. It's called mukav gevil, the parchment around the letters, what's not said. Koyach hagvul, koyach hahelim, ein soif. And there's those that everything is said. There's a lot of different types of manichim, and manichim have their mindless, and they also have their chesroinus. Here's a klal, but generally, Manichim try to do the best they can according to their capabilities, and we're very grateful for everything they did. And again, I'll tell you, I read the Sichos, I know the Manichim. Some of them are very close to me. I worked with a lot of Manichim. There's nothing that compares to listening and watching the Rebbe saying the Sicha. The Oisis Harav. And not because the Hanachos are not good. Sometimes the Hanachos are excellent. Sometimes they're not excellent. Sometimes they're excellent. But there's nothing that compares to it. There's nothing that compares to you. You just can't compare. You take the Purim Farbrengens, you take the Purim Farbrengens of the Yuds, of the Chafs, of the Lameds, the Mems. There's nothing like them. If you want to know what it means to be a Jew in the 20th century, 21st century post-Holocaust, you go through the Purim Farbrengens, you know what a Jew is. The Rebbe's hashkafa, so it's like gegossen with Torah, with hashkafa, with emunah, the nichnas yayin yotza soid. Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak is a shlich in Hartford. He once told me, I asked him, where did you see Purim Adel Yada by the Rebbe? So he said, well, what is gezen in the Torah? The Torah of Purim was Adel Yada. So it's like gegossen. The way the Rebbe spoke, he spoke about chinuch. He spoke about Amalek. He spoke about what emun is. And he spoke about what the hepech of emun is. He spoke about the nisyonis in America. The nenu misudasa shaloisei Russia. The sichis nenu misudasa. You can't be a Jew without these sichis. You can't understand what it means to be a Jew without these sichis. Sichis of anti-Semitism, Purim Chafei, Balatel, the Balachritz, the sichis about how the Megillah is structured, Biyurim in the Megillah. Half of a fella. Just giving you an example. The Hanachos are amazing, but nothing comes close to hearing the sichos from the Rebbe's mouth for a few reasons. First of all, the pinimius of the Rebbe comes out in the Rebbe's talking. You're not going to get that in the writing. Maybe you'll get a little bit of it, but you can't get what's the Lashon Sanhedrin. It's Burnim V'Yadaita Moskva. Tavne de Libi like Kasva Inchi. Right? You know the Gemara in Sanhedrin. One Sanhedrin says they can't start a court case Friday because Shabbos ain't done, and so they have to continue Sunday. And they're not going to remember their arguments from the day before. So the Gemara says, why don't they just write it down? He says, you can write down the heart. Tavne de Libi like Kasva Inchi. The nafshi yotza bedabre from the Rebbe, you can't get in the written word. Not chas v'sholem that the written word is not amazing, but it's a different metzias. That's why it's such a gewaldige inyan to listen to the sichos. I'm giving an example of Purim. You listen to the siyum of Masechta, the siyum of Makis, Yud Shvat Tovshin Chafei. I don't know. I think there were 10 sichos in the Farbrengen. Most of the sichos were siyum on Makis. The Rebbe made a siyum on Makis for hours and hours and hours, and he continued it the next Shabbos. See him in Makkah. He had to learn Ashtikul Gemara. This last two stories of Rebbe Akiva Mesachek with the Rome and the fox Mebeis Kotshak Kadoshim. The Rebbe asked like 20 kashas on the Gemara. You hear how to learn a Gemara, the uptight a Gemara. You hear how they ask a question on a Gemara, the Lashon a Gemara, Akiva Nichamtonu. The Rebbe goes through. Every time it says in Shas Akiva Nichamtonu, Rosh Hashanah Daf Chafei, Rebbe Akiva, 3 times Rebbe Akiva helps Rabbi Yeshua deal with crisis. There's a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah Chafei, a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah in Chafei, and Soif Makis. And first time it says Nichamtonu once, second time it says Nichamtonu twice. The koch of the Rebbe, the pnimius, hanefesh of the Rebbe, you can't get in the written word. It comes out, especially when the Rebbe would start crying, and you just hear the Rebbe's. When the Rebbe would scream, or the Rebbe would just express himself, even when he was not screaming. Another thing, the Rebbe's humor. The Rebbe would often put in humor, funny, interesting comments. They didn't make it into Likutei Sichos, because Likutei Sichos is very edited. You're not going to have the Rebbe's humor. Also, a lot of the Rebbe's derech agavs. The Rebbe would give derech agavs constantly. And from the Rebbe's derech agav, you could build heichalos after heichalos, oilemus. I'll tell you, I have given dozens, hundreds of very powerful speeches from these derech agavs. I've worked in an uptaichina Gemara, an uptaichina Rashi, an uptaichina Maisa, an uptaichina God of Chazal. I've worked in Hashkaf. It was derech agavs. Look at the sichos, you're not going to get it. So it's very, very critical to learn Likutei Sichos, to know Likutei Sichos. All the ha'aras, the maramekaimis, the Rebbe worked hard on Likutei Sichos, and there's tremendous ga'inus and chidushim and kol chelkei HaTorah. But there's something absolutely unique to just listen to the Rebbe's Farbrengens and Sichos. All the years, the Yuds and the Chavs and the Lameds, the Chuli, the Mems, the Nuns, just to listen and not just listen, to get a feel for it, to get an understanding of it. Something so powerful. You can, the Siyumei Mesivtas of the Rebbe, the Siyumim of the Rebbe's Mesivtas, yeah? You take Chavdalet Tevis Tofshin Yud Beis. It was a Siyum Anid, Siyum Ashas. The Sichos in Chelik Zayin, Parshas Mitzayrim. Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, Chatzi shears, Ziva, Yud Aleph Yoim. A mighty dikasich. But you have to listen the way the Rebbe says it. Diamonds, the way the Rebbe says it, how he teaches up Chatzi shear, how he teaches up Nida, Ziva, Machloikas Rabbi Yochanan. First of all, you learn how to think, how to say something, how to explain something. The way the Rebbe conveys the svaras and the kashas. Look at the sichos, it's different. It was edited. The Rebbe wanted it should be edited. And a lot of derech hagavs are cut out. And again, in Likud Yisichos, things are much more bekitzer. And then generally, when you write, it has the hagbolus of writing. That's why it's incredibly powerful and transformative in your Torah, in your avodah, in your Yiras Shamayim, in your Avos Hashem, Avos HaTorah, Avos Yisrael, in your development as people and as Jews and as Chassidim, to be able to listen and absorb the sichos, whatever is available on tape. I guess today we call it MP3. Especially, I still remember, you hear the Hadron of the Rebbe on Rambam, Tovshin Lamed Hey. Kuntres Yanosh Teres Achsidus, Yutas Kislev Chavav. You listen to the Sichos, Yutas Kislev Chafei. I'm just throwing out things that come to memories, just one after another. Incredible stuff. Yud Aleph, everybody knows Yud Shvat Lamed Beis, Yud Aleph Nissen Lamed Beis, Adam La'amal Yulad. You have it in a Sicha. Look at the Sichos, Chelik Tasvav, Parshas Lech Lecha, has Yud Aleph Nissen Tavshin Lamed Beis. It takes the Nekuda and captures it, and the Rebbe was Moisiv there, a whole shtickle over the Farbrengen. But you hear how the Rebbe developed Sicha after Sicha after Sicha, why Hashem made that we have to work in life, that we're not satisfied with free lunch. To be able to go out from a nivra to become a boire, it's priceless. What should I tell you? It molds a Jew. This makes a Jew. The chayis you get, Yiddishkeit, how to look at the world, how to look at yourself, how to deal with struggle, how to deal with galus, how to deal with darkness, how to deal with crisis, how to be there for people, how to change the world. It's an the Welt. Most important, how to live with geula, the Rebbe's eyes of geula. The sichos make you a metzias chadasha. A Gershon is guy can cut and shenel like by Matan Torah. Let's see if there's other questions here. Oh wow, a lot of questions. I see you guys woke up. I'm asking you for questions. It's a chuv geweckt from the chaloimas. Okay, let's see some other questions here. What's the main piece of advice you would give to the Bochurim regarding their Hanacha? The main piece of advice I would give you is, don't give up. Yiyush, I heard from the Rebbe, Yiyush is shaloi midas. Yiyush means you don't have das. That's how the Rebbe touched a Gemara in Bava Metzia. Not Yiyush shaloi midas, Shmeir. Yiyush is shaloi midas. If you have das, there's no Yiyush. Don't give up. Try again. Learn from others. Take Hanachos that were written, whatever language you're writing, and learn from them. When you learn a Sikh in Likutei Sichos, or you learn a Sikh in any of the Svarim, learn from it. See how it was written. See how to write something, and enhance it. Give it to other people for criticism. That would be my advice to you. Next question. If I keep writing Hanachos, will I easily be able to quote or pull things from different sichos? I don't know. Depends how good you become at it. If you mamish start mastering the sichos, you'll right away start being medama milsa lemilsa. You'll know a sugya, you say, the Rebbe discussed it here, the Rebbe discussed it here, the Rebbe discussed it here. So that's very powerful. But that really depends. Every person from Shura delay. Don't try to master everything. It never works like that. It's like in Torah. When you're learning something, learn it well, chazer it, retain it, and then slowly it builds and builds and builds. It doesn't happen in one day. It's la'at la'at. And don't get frustrated if you don't know everything. You know what I mean? Like the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, you're not going to finish it. You're not responsible to finish it. Loy alecha hamalacha ligmer, v'loy ata ben chayrin libatal memena. Did the Rebbe say clearly? Okay, this we did. Next question. Let me see these other questions. Okay. I don't see because some of them went on the top. Let me just see here. Okay, Taya de Bochurim lach. Takelel shishi, and we can sit in a ganze Nacht. But some of you must still want to sit on a Shagas Aryeh or a Chef Schmeitzer, or on a Sibis Amishpet, or on a B'chaim, or on a Bircha Shmuel, or on a Likutei Sichos. So whatever you want to sit at, Oid Hayom Gadol, Oid Halayla Gadol. I wish you tremendous hatzlacha in all aspects of your life, especially in Teirasa Yom Nasa. You should continue to steig in your learning, Batzlacha Muflaga, your limud hanigla, your limud hachsidis, B'tay Chavona and Hasaga and Achayis and a Geschmack, to be able to go Mechayil El Chayil and Teire and Avoideg Milas Chasadim, in your davening, in your mitzvahs, in your Avos Yisrael, in your Avos Hashem, in your Avos HaTeirah. The Rebbe used to say all of them are one. We should have atzloch in begashmius and in ruchnius, ad bli dai. I am so proud of you. I love you. And you are a tremendous source of inspiration and blessing to all of us, to all of the Jewish people, to the world. I know that the Rebbe is shepping nachas from you, just like all of us are shepping nachas from you. And you guys are amazing and unbelievable. And continue trucking. And I know that we all have setbacks and there's bumps on the road and there's stumbling blocks. Like Reb Mendel Futerfas used to say, don't get nispal from the world around you. And the ikke is nish nispal that from zich allein. Don't get nispal from the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh Abamas inside. Know who you really are. Identify it and run with it. Mechayil el chayil. And atzlocha and everything, especially atzlocha with the Hanachos, listening to the Sichos, learning the Sichos, hariving in the Sichos, understanding them, pilpulling zich in them, writing them, transcribing them, editing them. And from this, you're going to build a tremendous reservoir of Havana and Yediyah, and of course your Shemayim and Avos Shemayim, and it should be with tremendous hatzlacha, and I thank you very much. And Bekar of Mamish, we should have that famous posuk that the Rebbe would always quote from Yeshaya, Torah Chadosha Meiti Teitze, Chidush Torah Meiti Teitze, Umala Haaretz Deis Hashem, Kamayim Le'yam Mechasim, and Yishakenim in Ashikei Spihu, Ki Toivim Deidecha Meyayin, as Rashi writes in Shir Hashidim, the Rebbe would always quote, that Melech HaMashiach will be Megala, Soita Ameha, Umistar Tzvunaiseha, the ultimate geschmack and depth and infinity of Torah, Torah Shel Mashiach, and a te'imah, the taste of Torah Shel Mashiach, came in the Torah Sabal Shem Tov, the Talmidov, all the way down to the Rebbe, and have the moment that the Rambam says at the end of Hilchas Malachim, La'yeh Eisa Kol Ha'olam Kulei Al Adas Hashem Vaad, U'lefichach Hi Yisrael Chachamim Gdolim, V'yoidim Dvarim Astumim, V'yasigu Das Boirim Kifi Koyach Ha'adam Shenemar Ki Mol Haaretz Deis Hashem Kamayim Li'am Mechasim. And now I'm remembering the Hadrin that Rebbe made, Yud Aleph Nissen Tovshin Mem Dalet, on Masechta Tainis, and on this Rambam. I think it was almost 2 hours, an hour and a half, a very long Hadrin, a very hard Hadrin. It was a Tzarakat Shover, and at the end the Rebbe said the 3 Madreges are connected. Malchius, Zechroinis, Shofris, Mamale, Soiv of Atzmus, Poyel, Pu'ul, and Nifel. And the Rebbe said, Sarachmanas of the Olam. And therefore he's not going to explain what he means. And there was not a Geshmaka failing. The Rebbe said, Sarachmanas of the Olam, that they had to hear such a long Hadron. And the Rebbe cut off the Sikha with a bracha. It was the end of the Rambam. Shetakahav the Mullah Haaretz Deis Hashem, Kamayim Layam Mechasim, B'mheira b'yameinu, Amen v'amen, take it from Yad Mamish. Seid gesund.
Amen, amen. Yashakech, Rabbi Jacobson, Yashakech, sharing your memories, your experiences, and especially your chayas in the Yonim, and for really giving us a appreciation of the schus and the yakras of being these manichim of the Rebbe's Torah and really connecting with the Rebbe's Torah, the geschmack of the Rebbe's Torah. Shtaka be zecher to be manichim of the Torah Chadash Me'iti Teisei, the Skalas Malkein Mashichein Noteik Me'ad Mamish.
I mean, we'll see who the manichim will be. So Ken Zayin that Pinchas Reizes in the middle of Rebbe and the Mari. I don't know who's going to be the manichim then, but if we can hear it, it's very good. Michael Zayin the manichim, we can hear it, it's very good.
Right, oh, now so could learn that.
As they say in English, to be a fly on the wall.
Echt good. Ja, Shekar Gadol, Grace and Dank.
Chazak. Anigin.